हेलो एवरीवन, गुड मॉर्निंग। आज हम स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं चैप्टर नंबर 6 से। इट इज़ इन दिस चैप्टर दैट बामा मेंशंस हर फादर फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम. He was in the army, and this ensured that at least when he came home, the family had plenty to eat. Bama describes the daily diet and how poor she felt when she went to the hostel to study in high school, and how supportive her parents were. But they did not believe in sending her to college. They prefer her to train as a teacher, but a nun who had taught Bama in the 11th standard made a fuss and sent her to college after forcing Bama's mother to pawn the earrings she was wearing. है ना? So इसमें फस का मतलब होता है डिस्टर्बेंस क्रिएट कर देना. सो बामा की मदर को जो है अपने गहने जो वो इयरिंग्स पहन उनको पॉन मीन्स उनको गिरवी रखना पड़ा था. हर फादर वॉश्ड हिज हैंड ऑफ हर एंड शी हैड टू लिव इन द सेम क्लोथ्स फॉर अ वीक. मतलब उसके फादर ने उनको छोड़ा राइटर को छोड़ा और उनको जो है एक वीक के लिए सेम कपड़ों में रहना पड़ा था बामा को. Her performance brought her the respect of her classmates and teachers once again. She speaks of her sense of deprivation, which was balanced by her sense of achievement. She had enough money after finishing her B.Ed and joined a school as a teacher. She realized that if only Dalit children could be given a decent education, they too could live a life of moderate comfort like her. This was the impulse which made her enter a convent. It is only later that she came to know that the convent did not care for the poor and that the vows of poverty that the nuns took had no relation to reality. ये आंसर है, क्वेश्चन है ना, उसका आंसर है ये. But life was not easy for Bama when she left the order. Everything had changed. She had no money or job either. She began to share the same difficulties as all other Dalits. Even the poor of upper castes have a tough time, she says. Poor parayas have it even tougher because there can be no hope for them. Children can only work in such a climate, not seek an education. She speaks with despair. मतलब वो बड़े उदास होके बोलती हैं कि about how the wealthy live off the work of the poor. How the wealthy live off the work of the poor. She even wonders how one can fight for justice in this situation when one is hungry and thirsty. She says that even the church has let the Dalits down. Chapter number 7. In this chapter, which is the longest in the book, Bama speaks of her bhakti and belief in God, how it has changed over the years and of forms of worship and changes they have undergone. When she was young, she used to pray exactly as her family and priests had taught her. जैसे कि उनको फैमिली ने बताया था या प्रीस्ट ने बताया था. Prayers punctuated their daily life, and attendance at church was enforced by the biddings delivered by the teacher at school. She remembers an incident when a visiting white priest was pleased by her recitation of prayers. She lifted her up and kissed her and gave her 5 paise. Okay. Bama says that she used to be afraid to be. अच्छा sorry, थोड़ा सा छूट गया. What pleased her most was that the priest touched me and lifted me up. Bama says that she used to be afraid to be in a church alone. This was because the sisters had told the children at school that the devil kept a list of all their sins, and that if they committed too many sins, they would peel the skin off their backs. उनकी मतलब पीठ की स्किन वो निकाल देगा devil. She says that the nuns never told them any cheerful stories. Thus, Bama obeyed the sister in all things in order to be less sinful. Even in confession, and even though she may have had nothing to confess, Bama repeated that what had been taught to her. Slowly, Bama lost faith in what the nuns told her. The nuns acted like a brutal supervisory force, keeping order in the ranks. The children would be beaten to keep them awake during church services. Bama talks of how repressive and frightening it was. Also, they had to walk some distance to and from the church, which was in the streets of the upper castes. Bama says that she used to come first in all scripture tests and that she was full of devotion for Jesus even if she too told prayers only out of a sense of duty. Her belief was strong, so strong that when she received a shock while inserting flowers into the holes of a plug point, she thought that God was punishing her for stealing the flowers. She then recounts how the church at Chinnamalai came to be built because of a miraculous vision granted to the local priest. On the first Friday, on the first Friday of every month, there would be a prayer at the church there, and children would go off on Thursday evening itself, spending the night in the church. The festival was also celebrated by every May. She describes the festival scene in all its animated detail. When the when the festival still takes place, Bama feels that the devotion to Our Lady is manifested chiefly in choosing and wearing new clothes, feasting on a newly slaughtered chicken or goat. She hears now that people arrive drunk and start brawls. She says that she enjoyed herself in these pleasures in Chinnamalai till she grew up, and common sense told her that it was preferable to worship at home. Bama then describes the Easter celebrations. She ends this section by saying that no one seems to realize the significance of these festivals any longer. Devotion now is merely a matter of doing things out of sense of duty. It was when she left her village and joined the boarding school in her ninth class, that her devotion underwent a change. She lost her fear for bhayam likha hai, bhayam means fear for God, and began to feel pasam, love instead. She wanted to enter the convent right after school, but one of the sisters told her to consider it only after completing her college education. Okay. Uh, However, in college, her devotion began to wane. खत्म होने लग गया था उनका devotion. She did not believe any longer that God came to her through the priests and nuns. She began to question all forms of rituals and worship, but her faith in God did not diminish. She felt that ritual was sham and that God would be felt should be felt directly through the mind's eyes. She no longer had the desire to become a nun. When she began to teach in a school, the behavior of the nuns repulsed her. The nun ran a boarding school which was nominally for the sake of destitute children. However, they made the poor children do all the manual tasks. On top of this, there were caste, class, linguistic divisions among the nuns themselves. Mama feels that the nuns should have taught the Dalit children more than what the curriculum called for, made them aware about their situation in the world. Instead, everything they said to the children, everything in the manner in which they directed them, suggested that this was the way it was meant to be for Dalit, that there was no possibility for change. The only forced children to accept their unjust situation as their fate. The result of this was to make Bama want to become a nun so that we are on the nun. She could bring some she could become some difference to the way these children were taught and treated. She continued to have love and devotion towards Jesus and Mother Mary. When she read the Old Testament and the New Testament through once again, She realized that God had shown the greatest compassion for the oppressed. Jesus Christ had mainly associated himself with the poor. However, the church did not emphasize this. She makes the important point that the God they were told about was one who is loving, kind, gentle, one who forgives sinners, patient, tender, obedient. Wherever the God is also just, righteous, is angered by injustices, opposes falsehood, and never continues inequality. Okay, this God no one ever spoke about. इस भगवान के बारे में कभी नहीं बोला गया. Bama says that the oppressed are not taught about him, but rather are taught in an empty and meaningless way about humility, obedience, patience, gentleness. This inspires her further to become a nun, to take the true Jesus to the children, Dalit children, even though everyone advised her against it, even though she knew that no convent was going to allow her to act the way she wanted. She entered an order, like one who was falling into a well, blindfolded. Bama says that the 3 years of training were not bad. They discussed various issues and thought with some urgency about what they should do to alleviate suffering. She thought constantly of the oppressed people and was convinced that it was meaningless to repeat prayers in beautiful and decorative language, and to live without that correspondence and connection between prayers, worship, and life. She waited for her chance to serve the poor. However, she was sent to a prestigious school and asked to teach there to serve the rich. She felt that there was no love for the poor and the humble in the convent. She felt that the convent said one thing and practiced another, that there was no true love in the church, no forgiveness. There was injustice and there was punishment for those who did not obey. She found that instead of practicing poverty, there was a lot of importance given to material wealth and food. She critiques the order strongly, calling them hypocrites who were so habituated to their play acting that they can no longer distinguish between the role and the reality. She feels that the priests and nuns have lost touch with what Jesus stood for and would not understand his question if he were to appear before them to castigate them as they deserve. She feels that the church is made of the upper castes, while the believers are mostly lower castes and the Dalits. The clergy imposes blind belief and devotion on the lower castes to propagate the caste power structure. She says strongly that in the name of the God they actually लूटते हैं from the poor who struggle for their very livelihood. They do not allow the lower caste to open their eyes or to stand tall. She feels that all this will end sooner than later. Dalits have begun to understand the way the world works. They have realized that they have been maintained as the stone steps that others have trodden on as they raise themselves up. Dalits have realized that this is not God's message. They know that they too were created in the likeness of God. She ends by saying that there is an urge amongst Dalits to begin to live again with honor, self respect, and with a love towards all humankind. This, she says alone, is true devotion. Thank you so much. Please subscribe my channel. In the next video, I'll start with the chapter number 8. Thank you.